The program. How gangs run Rikers Island. Are you with it? For words. A simple question asked in a teenage detention unit on America's most notorious jail. But the wrong answer meant broken bones, a collapsed lung, or death. Court records show that 18-year-old Christopher Robinson gave the wrong answer. 12 hours later, he was dead, beaten, kicked, and stomped by fellow inmates. But here's what prosecutors discovered. The guards were watching. In fact, according to indictments, they'd given the order. Welcome to Rikers Island, where for over a decade, correctional officers allegedly ran a secret system. Former inmates describe it in testimony. Guards picked certain prisoners as enforcers. These inmates controlled everything. Who ate, who called home, who got beaten in the day room. The city called it isolated incidents. But court filings, investigative reports, and federal monitors paint a different picture. This is the documented story of how America's largest jail complex turned teenagers into weapons. By the end of this documentary, you'll understand why federal judges said Rikers operates with a deep-seated culture of violence. You'll see how one correctional officer's 6-year prison sentence did nothing to stop the pattern. And you'll discover what's happening right now, today, inside those walls. But first, you need to understand what made Rikers the perfect breeding ground for the program. 400 acres in the East River, built on garbage, literally. For nearly 100 years, New York City dumped trash here, expanding the island from 87 acres to over 400. According to historical records, the smell was so unbearable that inmates reported certain days as intolerable. When a main jail opened in 1932, it became the largest correctional facility in the world. Today, Rikers isn't one jail. It's 10 separate facilities holding thousands of people. Most are awaiting trial. According to New York City Open data, 86% haven't been convicted of anything. Let's talk about violence. In fiscal year 2008, when the program was exposed, there were 19 inmate slashings, over 6,000 fighting infractions, and 427 assaults on staff. Fast forward to 2022. Same facility, fewer inmates. The slashings increased 25-fold. According to federal monitoring reports, by 2015, Rikers saw 9,424 assaults in a single year, the highest in 5 years. But one facility stood out as particularly brutal, the Robert and Davern Center, RNDC. This is the adolescent unit, housing teenagers aged 16 to 18. According to testimony from juvenile justice advocates, young people described it as a battle camp for kids. In the first 10 months of 2008 alone, 39 teenagers at RNDC suffered serious facial injuries. Broken noses, fractured eye sockets, shattered jaws. Court investigations revealed something disturbing. 20 of those cases directly involved gang inmates attempting to control other inmates. The same phrase appeared in incident reports again and again. This wasn't random violence. Multiple sources describe a system, a hierarchy, an organized program. Here's what makes this story different from typical prison violence. According to indictments, the guards weren't just allowing it. Prosecutors alleged they were organizing it, running it, benefiting from it. The Bronx district attorney called it a systematic program. Federal prosecutors described a deep-seated culture of violence. And it wasn't isolated to one rogue officer. Court records show this pattern existed for well over a decade. Different guards, different years, same system. If this investigation is exposing something you've never heard before, hit subscribe. We're documenting the cases that mainstream media often misses. According to a Department of Correction report completed just 4 days after Christopher Robinson's murder, the program operated with a specific 5-tier hierarchy. Think organized crime, but inside a teenage jail. At the bottom, inmates who were with it. They followed the rules, paid tribute, stayed quiet. One level up, the enforcers who asked the question. At the top, what former inmates called the team. These were the most violent prisoners, handpicked by corrections officers to maintain control. The system started with a simple test. According to testimony from multiple former inmates, when you arrived at RNDC, someone would approach you. Are you with it? Court records document what this meant. If you said yes, you paid. Commissary items. Phone time. Property. One inmate testified that the team controlled who ate, who made calls, who accessed the day room. If you said no, or if you refused to pay, witnesses describe what happened next. You were taken to the day room. Multiple inmates would surround you, and you'd receive what Lloyd Nicholson, the first guard indicted, allegedly called a moment of truth. But here's where it gets calculated. According to court indictments, officers gave specific instructions to their enforcers. A source told the Village Voice that Nicholson told inmates, avoid hitting them in the face. It leaves telltale marks. This appears in multiple cases. When corrections officers Michael McKie and Colin Nelson were later indicted for running their own version of the program, the same instruction appeared in their case file. This wasn't spontaneous violence. According to prosecutors, this was coached, methodical, designed to avoid detection. So what did the guards get out of this system? According to indictments and testimony, it was simple, control without effort. The enforcers freed officers from having to constantly monitor the floor during their shifts. One investigative report described it like this. As long as the tier was quiet, the guards could relax. The inmates did the disciplining. In exchange, court records show the guards gave their enforcers permission. Permission to extort. Permission to steal from other inmates. Permission to rule the unit. The third rule was never written down, but multiple sources describe it. Don't tell. According to a lawsuit filed by 18-year-old Alistair Polanco, 1 month before Christopher Robinson's murder, he was brutally beaten by a team of inmates at RNDC. His right eye socket was broken. His jaw was fractured. His ribs were bruised. But Polanco testified that guards delayed getting him medical help. When they finally transported him, there were warnings. Keep quiet. Don't talk about who did this. In the Nicholson case, prosecutors said he tried to delay reporting a prisoner's collapsed lung for hours. According to testimony, he told the injured teen he'd try to pin the blame on the other inmates. Some of you are going to go down for this. Witnesses recalled him saying, these weren't just the rules of the program. According to federal reports, this was the culture of Rikers itself. A 2009 New York Times investigation found a pattern. At least 7 lawsuits accused guards of complicity in inmate violence. None went to trial. In 3 settlements, the city admitted no wrongdoing. Every year, according to records, inmates file about 1,300 claims against New York City for violence at Rikers. Over 5 years, it cost taxpayers $61.7 million in settlements. The violence wasn't a bug in the system. Multiple investigations suggest it was a feature. Here's the part that shocked federal investigators. According to documents obtained by the Village Voice, the second and third highest officials in the NYC Department of Correction had been receiving intelligence reports about the program for an entire year before Christopher Robinson was murdered. Every Friday, according to correction sources, officials met with intelligence investigators and wardens. Time and again, those investigators highlighted extortion by gang inmates at RNDC. They suggested a disturbing trend was developing. But according to 3 correction sources, officials treated each incident as isolated. Attackers were transferred. Infractions were handed out. Nothing more. Let's look at what those reports showed. On March 23, 2008, an 18-year-old inmate was asked, "Are you with it?" His orbital bone was broken. May 3rd, another assault. Broken jaw. Investigation found allegations that an inmate was extorting all new arrivals. May 19th, fight with earmarks of control, according to the report. June 15th, fractured nose and eye socket after the victim was asked, "Are you with it?" June 26th, another broken eye socket. Investigation determined one inmate monopolized phone access while a 16-year-old victim was controlled. Case after case, month after month, all flagged to top brass, all dismissed as isolated incidents. In February 2008, 8 months before Robinson's murder, a grand jury indicted correctional officer Lloyd Nicholson. The 35-year-old, 7-year veteran of Rikers allegedly used a select group of teenage inmates as enforcers under what he explicitly called the program. According to the indictment, on June 10, 2007, Nicholson ordered 6 youths to beat up 2 others for refusing to obey his orders. One victim suffered a collapsed lung. He was denied medical treatment for several hours until finally being transported to Elmhurst Hospital. Prosecutors said in court, he barely survived. The indictment also charged that Nicholson used a wooden stick, probably a broom or mop handle, to beat another prisoner in May 2007. Here's what shocked investigators. When Nicholson was indicted, when the pattern was exposed, correction officials insisted this was rare. Department of Correction spokesman Stephen Morello said, "We believe that such behavior by our correction officers is very infrequent." Very infrequent. 8 months later, Christopher Robinson was beaten to death under the same program. This time, 3 more guards were indicted. According to Bronx District Attorney Robert Johnson's office, corrections officers Michael McKie and Khalid Nelson handpicked and oversaw a gang of inmates who beat and terrorized other inmates over a 4-month period. They called their operation, word for word, the program. So how did this keep happening? According to former correction officers and inmates who've come forward, there's a broader culture at play. 2 former inmates, David Campbell and Jared Shanahan, documented their experiences for the Center for New York City Affairs. They described arriving at Rikers for the first time. Rules and policies were selectively enforced, they wrote, and often just made up, depending on the day and the correction officer in charge. One CO during their time spelled out exactly what the department motto care, custody, and control really meant. I don't care, you're in my custody, and I'm in control. According to their account, most new arrivals were left to rely on other inmates for survival. When they asked COs basic questions, how to sign up for sick call, how to do laundry, officers would walk away or respond with hostility. This created a vacuum. And in that vacuum, according to court records, the program flourished. Former inmates describe it clearly. If the guards won't help you and won't protect you, you turn to whoever has power. And at RNDC, according to testimony and indictments, the power structure was controlled by the team, with the guards' blessing. But the program wasn't the only system hiding in plain sight. In 2024, a shocking investigation by Gothamist revealed that nearly 60% of Adult Survivors Act lawsuits filed in New York City involved allegations of sexual assault at Rikers. Over 700 women alleged they were sexually assaulted by corrections officers at the Rose M. Singer Center, the women's jail at Rikers, known as Rosie's. According to a U.S. Department of Justice survey from 2011 to 2012, nearly 6% of people incarcerated at Rosie's reported sexual victimization by jail staff. The national average was 1.8%. One former prisoner told investigators, "Everyone knew what was happening. Even after the program was exposed, even after guards went to prison, the pattern continued." In 2020, a lawsuit alleged that Rikers officials were still running a similar scheme, this time called the World Tour. According to the complaint, 19-year-old Jamani Morris was repeatedly moved between units where guards knew he would be vulnerable to assault. The lawsuit alleged this was another derivation of the program, exposed by the Bronx DA's office back in 2008. Same system, different name, more victims. Christopher Robinson was 18 years old. He worked in Brooklyn. According to his family's pastor, Bishop Wilbur Jones, Christopher was a good kid trying to make it. One night, his manager asked him to work late. He missed his curfew, a parole violation for a minor offense. For that, he was sent back to Rikers, back to RNDC, the teenage unit where the program ruled. According to testimony, just 2 days before his death, Christopher told his mother he'd had an argument with someone in the jail. She could tell something was wrong. "I could tell in his voice," Charnel Robinson later said. "He should be here with me." On October 18th, 2008, mother and son spoke by phone. They were scheduled to see each other that Sunday. It would be their last conversation. Later that day, according to court records and investigations, Christopher was approached by members of the team, the inmate enforcers handpicked by corrections officers McKie and Nelson. They asked him a question. Court testimony doesn't record his exact answer, but what happened next was documented in the indictment. Christopher Robinson was punched, kicked, and stomped. According to the Village Voice investigation, he bled to death over a period that may have stretched 12 hours. 12 hours. Investigators probed whether guards caused a lapse in security that allowed the attack, or if they simply turned a blind eye. But the indictment against McKie and Nicholson was more direct. According to prosecutors, the officers didn't just allow the beating. At their behest, according to the indictment, the team asked inmates whether they were with it. If inmates said no, they were beaten. Assistant District Attorney James Goward stated clearly, they authorized and directed it. Charnel Robinson, Christopher's mother, says correction officials never reached out to her. Not even a simple condolence. It just really troubles me, she told reporters. I haven't heard anything from the DOC. In August 2009, she filed a wrongful death lawsuit seeking $20 million. The pain of not having my son hasn't gotten any easier, she said. I have no choice but to seek justice. Christopher was her only child. He's buried in a cemetery in New Jersey. These stories represent real families torn apart by a system that failed them. If you believe these cases deserve attention, leave a comment with your thoughts. Your voice adds pressure for accountability. 1 month before Christopher's murder, another teenager experienced the program firsthand. Alistair Polanco was 18 years old, detained at RNDC. According to his lawsuit against the city, a group of inmates involved in the program brutally assaulted him. My right eye socket was broken, he testified. My jaw was hit. The right side of my ribs was all bruised. The attackers beat him after he refused to answer yes to the question, "Are you down with it?" But here's what's critical. According to the lawsuit, this happened while the same indicted officers, McKie and Nicholson, were on duty in that very unit. Despite the severity of his injuries, according to court records, DOC officials failed to uncover the alleged scheme in time to prevent Christopher Robinson's fatal assault just 30 days later. In February 2009, another lawsuit surfaced. Tyreek Shuford filed a complaint for a beating he received in 2007, a full year before Robinson's death. According to the filing, Shuford was attacked by prisoner enforcers at RNDC with guards' permission. After the beating, he wasn't allowed to go to the infirmary for 2 days. 2 days of pain, swelling, possible internal injuries. All while corrections officers, according to his lawsuit, did nothing. The pattern was clear. The warnings were there. But according to multiple investigations, the system continued. On May 2, 2008, 5 months before Robinson's murder, 18-year-old Ricardo Marsden filed a lawsuit alleging he was assaulted by 6 prisoners. His lawsuit describes the injuries: black eye, bruises all over body, leg, back, blood in my ears, busted lip. But the most damning part of his complaint came in one short sentence. Officer stood there watching. An officer watching as 6 inmates beat an 18-year-old. Attorney Michael Houston, who represented another victim, told reporters, "Young people tell me when they go in there, the culture is such that the kids control the jail. The guards know this happens, and they look the other way." According to the indictment against McKie and Nicholson, there were at least 7 teenage victims identified by name. But Assistant DA Goward said at their arraignment that there were scores more who were victimized. Scores more. Think about that. Dozens of teenagers, maybe hundreds over the years, subjected to this system. Most never filed lawsuits. Many never reported it. Some probably thought this was just how jail worked. But court investigations revealed something that former inmates and their families have been saying for years. This wasn't normal prison violence. According to federal reports and indictments, this was systematic, organized, encouraged. In another documented case from 2005, an inmate named Donald Jackson suffered serious head injuries after being beaten by fellow prisoner Donald Fisher. Fisher initially claimed Jackson had stolen a cookie, but in February 2008, Fisher gave a sworn account that changed everything. According to his testimony, a guard pulled him aside and explained that Jackson was running around and thieving. The guard told him, "Before you do anything, I'm going to go to the other side and then do what you got to do." Fisher also testified about his role. "I was the house captain and it was my job to enforce certain rules. Anybody that acted up in the house, it was my job to put them in line." As for the cookie story, Fisher admitted, "It was a lie to gas myself up to hit the dude." Donald Jackson won a $500,000 settlement from New York City. Attorney Michael Houston represented an 18-year-old whose jaw was broken in 3 places by other prisoners. The attack occurred in RNDC, and according to the lawsuit, a guard watched without interfering or calling for assistance. 3 places. In one attack, while a corrections officer observed. These weren't random acts of violence between inmates who didn't get along. According to multiple lawsuits, testimony, and indictments, this was the program, a systematic method of control that turned teenage prisoners into weapons. But this wasn't just happening in the adolescent unit. In October 2005, 10 prisoners filed a lawsuit alleging 24 Rikers guards rampaged through their unit after a prisoner attacked a guard. The prisoners were beaten while guards shouted, "Whose house is this?" "Our house." 1 minute of the melee was caught on camera. Then, according to the lawsuit, a guard turned the camera off for the next 30 minutes. The case, Prude versus City of New York, is one of countless examples documented in federal court records of guards either participating in or orchestrating violence. So what happened to the guards? Lloyd Nicholson, the first officer indicted for running the program, was convicted in June 2010 of gang assault charges. In August 2010, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Prosecutors said he imposed order by having teenage inmates beat other teenagers who stepped out of line. One attack left a young prisoner with a punctured lung. At his sentencing, Nicholson maintained his innocence. The Corrections Officers Union backed him, claiming the allegations were fabricated by prisoners. In January 2012, Michael McKie and Colin Nelson were sentenced for their roles in Christopher Robinson's murder and the program. McKie received 2 years in prison. Nelson received 1 year. 2 years and 1 year. For a system that led to an 18-year-old's death. For a pattern that victimized scores of teenagers. At the sentencing, Charnel Robinson, Christopher's mother, spoke. "At the end of the day, these people are still able to see their families. But my only child is a sight I'll never see again." Denise Albright, the 3rd officer indicted in the Robinson case, faced charges as well. According to court records, she was among the officers who ran the program in that unit. 5 inmates pleaded guilty in connection with the investigation. Charges were pending against 7 others at the time. But here's the twist that shocked legal experts and victims' families. None of the guards were charged with Christopher Robinson's death itself, only with gang assault, official misconduct, and related charges. You might think this is where the story ends. Guards convicted, system exposed, reforms implemented. But here's what most people don't know. According to federal monitoring reports, violence at Rikers didn't decrease after these convictions. It exploded. Remember those statistics from 2008? 19 slashings. By 2022, with far fewer inmates, 491 slashings. Fights and assaults skyrocketed. Uses of force by guards more than doubled since federal monitoring began in 2015. In 2015, the city entered a consent decree with the federal government promising sweeping reforms. A federal monitor was appointed. Millions of taxpayer dollars were spent. According to the monitoring team's reports, around 8 years later, the monitor noted progress was advancing at a glacial pace. The department remained mired in dysfunction. In 2023, the Legal Aid Society asked federal judge Laura Swain to hold the city in contempt. They presented evidence that violence levels were higher than when the judgment was first entered. On November 27, 2024, Judge Swain agreed. She ruled that the current rates of use of force, stabbings and slashings, fights, assaults on staff, and in-custody deaths remain extraordinarily high. In January 2025, 17 years after Lloyd Nicholson was first indicted for running the program, Judge Swain announced she was inclined to remove the jail complex from city control. On January 28, 2025, it became official. Nicholas DML, former commissioner of the Vermont Department of Corrections, was appointed as an independent administrator. Rikers Island officially fell into federal hands. Mayor Zoran Mamdani lost local control. After nearly a century of city mismanagement, after decades of documented violence, after countless lawsuits and investigations, the federal government stepped in. But here's the part that should terrify anyone who cares about justice. According to federal monitoring data, dating back to 2014, over 100 people have died on Rikers Island while in city custody. Over 100 deaths. In 2024 alone, there were 5 deaths. As of September 2025, there have been 12 deaths. From January to September 2025, there were already 2,113 recorded incidents of inmates assaulting staff. That's 8 assaults on staff every single day. So here's the real twist, the part that connects everything. The program never ended. It just evolved. In 2021, a New York City judge ordered the release of a detainee known as Relator G, citing conditions at Rikers as entirely foreseeable and noting the Department of Corrections' deliberate indifference. According to reports, underground fight clubs were still operating. Guards were still deputizing gang members. The same system that killed Christopher Robinson in 2008 was documented again in 2021. Multiple investigations point to the same root cause. According to federal monitors, the violence isn't happening despite the correction system. In many documented cases, it's happening because of it. When guards are outnumbered, when facilities are understaffed, when there's no accountability, a vacuum forms. And in that vacuum, power structures emerge. But here's what's different at Rikers compared to most jails. According to federal reports, Rikers employs almost 1 uniformed staff member for every person in custody. The staffing ratio is 4 times the national average and 1.5 times higher than the 1990s. So it's not a lack of resources. According to the monitor's reports, it's a failure of will, a failure of accountability, a culture that, according to multiple court filings, has tolerated and in some cases encouraged violence for decades. Let's talk about what this costs. Not just in human suffering, but in taxpayer dollars. So far, about $25 million has been spent on federal monitoring alone. That doesn't include the settlements. According to court records, every year inmates file about 1,300 claims against the city for Rikers-related violence. From 2003 to 2008, those settlements cost $61.7 million. In 2007, the city settled a class action suit from prisoners injured by guards, $2.2 million. In 2014, the city settled a wrongful death case, $3.8 million. These numbers don't include the Adult Survivors Act lawsuits. Over 700 sexual assault claims filed in 2023 to 2024. Most are still pending. In October 2019, the New York City Council voted to close Rikers Island by 2027. The plan involves building 4 borough-based jails to replace the island complex. But as of 2025, according to reports, delays have pushed back the timeline. The facility that was supposed to close by December 31st, 2026, is still operating, still violent, still under federal control. The City Council has called for millions in additional funding, alternatives to incarceration, supervised release programs, mental health services. But according to critics, these are the same promises made after the program was exposed in 2008. The same promises made after federal monitoring began in 2015. This is one chapter in a much larger story of criminal justice failure in America. Subscribe to follow our continued investigation into the systems that were supposed to protect us. So what does the program really tell us about American corrections? According to legal experts and reform advocates, Rikers represents an extreme version of a problem that exists nationwide. When jails prioritize control over rehabilitation, when guards face no consequences for abuse, when prosecutors fail to charge even in cases of documented violence, you create the perfect conditions for systems like the program to flourish. Christopher Robinson didn't die because of random violence. According to prosecutors and court records, he died because a system was in place, a system that gave certain inmates power in exchange for maintaining control, a system that multiple guards allegedly used because it made their jobs easier. But here's the question that haunts this story. How many other programs exist in jails and prisons across America? How many facilities use similar systems? Different names, same concept. How many corrections officers have made these same calculations? According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, There are over 600,000 corrections officers in the United States, overseeing 1.2 million people in state and federal prisons, plus hundreds of thousands more in local jails. Most are professional. Most follow the rules. But according to the National Institute of Justice, corruption and misconduct remain persistent problems in American corrections. And when these problems exist in America's largest jail complex, in one of the most scrutinized facilities in the country, in a city with massive resources and oversight, what's happening in places with less attention? Christopher Robinson's mother said it best. The pain of not having my son hasn't gotten any easier. I have no choice but to seek justice. But justice, in this case, remains incomplete. Michael McKie served 2 years. Colin Nelson served 1. Both are now free. Christopher Robinson is still dead. Alistair Polanco still carries the scars from his broken eye socket. Ricardo Marsden remembers the officer who stood there watching. And according to federal reports, teenagers at Rikers today still face violence rates that are extraordinarily high. Here's the final piece that connects everything. According to federal monitoring reports and legal filings, the same officials who knew about the program for a year before Robinson's death were promoted. Chief of Facility Operations Patrick Walsh, who according to sources received regular intelligence reports about the gang violence and extortion at RNDC, later rose through the ranks. The city paid millions in settlements but admitted no wrongdoing. Guards were convicted, but the system that enabled them remained intact. And that's the real program, not the one run by Nicholson or McKie or Nelson. The real program is a corrections system that, according to federal judges and monitors, has shown deliberate indifference to constitutional violations for decades. A system where, according to court records, young people arrive terrified and leave traumatized, if they leave at all. So where does this leave us in 2026? Federal receiver Nicholas the ML now controls Rikers Island. He has 3 years to achieve substantial compliance with the consent decree. But according to a former corrections official writing in the chief, 3 years means 1,200 more slashings, 30 more deaths, 3,000 more assaults on staff, 24,000 more fight infractions, and 21,000 more uses of force. Based on current rates. In 2025, according to news reports, the Eric Adams administration authored an executive order to reestablish an office for immigration and customs enforcement on Rikers after a 10-year hiatus. The facility that was supposed to close by 2027 is instead expanding certain operations. According to city council members, this directly contradicts the mandate to close Rikers and represents a step backward. But with federal control now in place, those political battles may become less relevant. The question is whether federal oversight can succeed where decades of city management failed. Charnel Robinson continues to seek justice for her son. His wrongful death lawsuit is settled, but no amount of money brings Christopher back. Alistair Polanco's lawsuit is among many that revealed the pattern. The families of the 100-plus people who died at Rikers since 2014 still grieve. And according to legal advocates, scores of other victims of the program never came forward. Their stories remain untold. If this documentary exposed something you believe more people should know about, here's what you can do. First, understand that Rikers isn't unique. According to criminal justice reform organizations, similar patterns of violence and guard misconduct exist in facilities across the country. Second, according to advocacy groups like the Art and Resistance Through Education Center, New Yorkers can contact their city council members and mayor to urge criminal justice reforms. Third, support organizations that provide legal representation to incarcerated people. According to court records, many of these cases only came to light because of civil rights attorneys willing to fight. The program isn't just a Rikers Island story. According to criminal justice researchers, it's a case study in what happens when corrections systems prioritize control over constitutional rights, when guards face no accountability, when prosecutors decline to bring charges even with documented evidence, when city officials treat each incident as isolated despite clear patterns, when federal oversight takes decades to implement meaningful change. In 2009, The New York Times reported that the pattern of cases suggests that city correctional officials have been aware of a problem in which Rikers guards have acquiesced or encouraged violence among inmates. That was 17 years ago. According to federal monitoring reports from 2024, those same patterns persist. Guards still face allegations of allowing or encouraging inmate violence. The rates of stabbings, assaults, and deaths remain extraordinarily high. Christopher Robinson was 18 years old when he died in October 2008. He missed a curfew. For that, he was sent to Rikers. For that, he was subjected to the program. For that, he never came home. The story of corruption at Rikers Island goes far deeper than the program. In our next investigation, we'll expose the documented cases of guards smuggling drugs, sexual assault rings that operated for decades, and a systematic strip search policy that violated tens of thousands of people's constitutional rights. According to court records, what you just watched is only the beginning.